Kia ora. Thank you for joining our quarterly update. I'm Peter Kerr and I'll be hosting today's session. We've changed things up a bit this year. We're going to have a bit of an interview format, but at the end of every session you'll have an opportunity to ask the presenters some questions. We'll start today's update with a karakia.
Tēnā tātou kanu te mihi kia koutou I tēnei wā, Mano e tātou. Kia tau ngā mānakitanga a te mea ngaro ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Kia māhia te hua mā kiki, kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori. Kia tūturu, ka whakamaua kia tēnā huie tāiki.
Kia ora, thanks Will. Just before we continue, can I just ask that everyone has their microphones and cameras switched off. Today we're going to cover a range of topics from security of supply, outcomes for consumers, recommendations from MDAG, our Generation Investment Survey, and we're going to find out about what's in the pipeline for compliance education. But to kick things off, we've got our CE, Sarah Gillies here. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Peter. And thanks everyone for joining us today. We've got a lot on the agenda. And a happy 2024. I hope everyone had a chance for a break. And yeah, there's a lot going on this year, so it's going to be a big year. Thanks for joining us. We know your time is really precious and we want these updates to be as useful as they can be. So we're keen for it to be a little bit more two-way this time. So please do ask questions and let us know what you think of the format and the content. We are trialling a slightly less formal approach, as Peter mentioned, a little bit of a conversation. So we'll give that a go and see how it works. So I'll hand over to Peter.
Thanks, Sarah. Sarah, I believe you already had a busy day today. You were presenting at the Select Committee for the Authority's annual review. What are your reflections on that?
Yeah, that's right. So I did have our annual review at the Select Committee this morning. It was a really great opportunity to sort of reflect on the year that we've had, but also talk about the year that we've got coming up. Lots of great questions and lots of real interest from the committee and the sector in general. 2022-23 was a really big year for us with some significant and really exciting changes. We've had new board members, new chair. Obviously, I was new to the role and other new leaders across the organisation, as well as lots of really talented new kaimahi across our organisation generally, which is great. And a lot of work. So our work, as you will all know, went right across the spectrum from transmission to retail. But for us, the starting point has really been about improving outcomes for consumers. Other things that are top of mind, security of supply, obviously. Last year we put in place 4 initiatives to help manage winter peak periods. We focused on enhancing information provision so that market participants can make timely risk management and resource commitment decisions. We brought in real-time pricing at the end of 2022, but obviously made some additional changes in early 2023, which helps give people the means for flexible resources to signal their intentions to the market through the dispatch notification product. So these initiatives, the industry participation generally and the careful management of the system operator helped to meet the challenges of winter 2023 and keep the power on for New Zealanders. Which was great. We know that there'll be challenges this coming winter too, and so you'll be aware that we have been looking at short and long-term solutions to security of supply. We're really pleased to see that market participants are responding to the challenges with initiatives that provide some flexibility in the short term. And we know that supply and demand are both really important as we move through this transition to a low emissions future. With more investment in flexible resources such as battery energy storage systems and demand response, we know that these challenges will ease over time. And it's great to see that there is a lot of investment in generation projects in the pipeline. Julie is going to talk to you a little bit more about that later in the session, where she's going to outline the findings of our latest Generation Investment Survey. So that's just a little bit.
Cool, thanks Sarah. So there's some great development and challenges and opportunities in all of that. Some big developments on improving customer outcomes have been recently announced. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. So we recently announced some decisions in the consumer care space. We've made decisions on the consumer care guidelines We've also put out a consultation on comparison and switching, and we're also currently consulting on improvements to monitoring of the retail market as well. Daniel Griffiths is going to talk a little bit more about that in the session as well. But ultimately what we're really interested in is making sure that consumers have got choices in accessing the energy that they need now and in the future.
Sarah, what's top of mind for you as we head into 2024?
A lot. So a lot of those things that I've mentioned, but also wanted to highlight the Market Development Advisory Group work. So you'll be aware that MDAG's final report came in December, which was great. And that contains a lot of recommendations for the changes that our wholesale electricity market needs to make to help navigate the shift to an increasingly renewables system. So Kirsty Hutchison, our Market Policy Manager, and Seb Brown, who's a Senior Analyst in the team, are going to talk to you a little bit more about that too in this session as well.
Now, are there any specific actions or recommendations that you were focused on?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the MDAG report, and many of you will have read it. But one of the things I wanted to call out is that they've highlighted the importance of risk management and competition, obviously, in electricity markets. We've done a lot of work in the last decade in terms of developing risk management tools. And right now we're increasing our understanding and transparency of risk management options for electricity retailers. We're focusing on over-the-counter contracts and other risk management options to consider if there are barriers to entry or expansion in the retail market. So we've started requesting information from retailers, and we're analysing that data, and then we'll be back in touch once we've worked our way through that.
Sarah, in addition to all of that, I believe the authority has been establishing a new advisory group. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so people will be aware that we consulted last year on the form and shape of our advisory groups and the way that we work with industry. We really value the input that we get from our advisory groups. It's been, instrumental in shaping a lot of our work program over the years. And we are going to be establishing a new advisory group. We did a couple of rounds of consultation and I think some really important conversations. One of the things we wanted to make sure we did was get a more diverse membership as well. So we get some really fantastic expertise from the industry, but also to get that wider perspective, to get, capture those kind of many different voices that are interested in and are impacted by our regulation. So that's going to be pretty important. And, I've talked quite a bit about how I want the authority to work differently. And this is one of the things that's going to help us in that. So we're going to be putting out a call for nominations, I think, on the 13th of February, and you'll hear more about that then.
So improving security of supply or keeping the lights on is obviously a key focus for us. Can you tell us what the authority is doing in this space? Yeah,
sure. So we've obviously got an active program of work to support security of supply, and I've kind of mentioned that already. We're working with the whole industry, generators, retailers, distributors and other government agencies, and of course the system operator, to ensure we're making this transition in an efficient way with this increased electrification. We're thinking about both the physical power system, but also the market that supports it, and how they're going to need to change and evolve to support that future, particularly with increased reliance on electricity. So we're really trying to take a longer term view. We're thinking about it over multiple time horizons. So we know what might be happening in the future, but also what we've got to work through in the more immediate term to get there. So in terms of regulatory enhancements in the next 12 months, we've got a couple of work streams that are going to deliver in the near term while also keeping our eye on the horizon. Chris is going to talk a bit more about that in today's session, but we've got a bit of a work stream on energy, but also a work stream on peak capacity as well. We're also doing work on monitoring and sort of the broader kind of market information generally. And we've got those strategic work programs as well that are kind of looking at the longer term. So things like the FSR program, Future Security and Resilience, and obviously the MDAG work that I've already talked about is a critical part of that too. So lots happening.
Gosh, yeah, lots to do in just that area.
Yeah, lots to do, lots to engage on, which is why it's great to have so many people, coming along to this session today and engaging with our work generally. Our board direction is really clear. The board wants us to shift gear to provide regulatory certainty that we all need for New Zealand to make this shift and this transition. And one of the things that's important for us in that is our funding to keep pace with that change. People will be aware that in terms of our levies, we have requested a moderate increase to help us scale up to keep up with that pace of transformation that's happening in the industry. We're really mindful that New Zealanders are facing financial pressures, and we're mindful of anything that might contribute to that. But hopefully many of you saw and participated in our levy consultation. It's really about us striking a balance between responding quickly, but also being proactive and staying ahead of the changes that we know will need to come in the future. So it's that kind of immediate term, but also having that longer term horizon view as well. And I guess the next steps for that are obviously goes to the Minister. The Minister has the final say on that, and that then goes through the budget process. So we'll know more about that in due course.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Thanks for sharing what you and the authority will be focusing on. Now we have an opportunity for anyone in the audience to ask Sarah a question. Maybe as we're waiting for a question to formulate, Sarah, is there anything that kind of keeps you awake at night in your job?
Not keeps me awake at night, but I think, you know, you've heard the extent of the work we've got to do, or you know the extent of the work we've got to do. For me, it's about, you know, it's a system, and we need to be thinking about it in a systems way. So we've got a whole load of pieces of work, but actually we also need to bring them together and be able to communicate to people how they fit together and consider the kind of wider impacts of each thing. They don't operate in isolation. So I think for me, that's what's top of mind, is how do you keep that wider picture and keep all the things happening in a kind of sensible way.
Thank you. Got a question coming in.
Callum's got his hand up.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Peter. So I heard you went to the Select Committee today. One of the things that the Select Committee has been interested in the past, I think is usually asked, is, and it's among over 100 questions they will typically ask, is about turnover, and that in the past has been a bit of an issue within the authority. Have you got any sort of latest data there, and is it trending in the right direction?
Yeah. Thanks, Callum. Great question. I'm really pleased to say it is trending in the right direction. It's definitely down quite a bit. I think for the year ending 30 June last year, it was down to 29%, which was a 10% drop from where it had been previously. More recent information, it's dropped further than that. And I think, you know, for me, it's about, we obviously, as an organisation, we need to attract and retain a lot of talent, as does the industry. You know, we're all in this same boat of having to get amazing people to come and support the significant work program that we've all got ahead of us. For me, it's a focus on helping develop our people, helping them understand how they're contributing to a really important wider goal. And I think we're making great progress in that regard. Yeah, thanks, Callum.
Yeah, we've just got another question from the audience. Sarah, can you describe how your capability and capacity to respond has evolved into 2023? How have you changed your structure?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess I think about that in a few ways. I mean, we first of all, I think about the authority's capability and capacity as being wider than us, right? Because we are informed by and supported by the industry and consumer groups and all of our stakeholders who help provide perspectives. And I think that's a really important part of our broader capability and capacity. And then I would say advisory groups are another significant part of that. And, you know, I really value the work that our advisory groups do. So that, again, is supporting our capability and capacity. We have been fortunate to hire some great people from across the sector, which is critical. But also what I think, the other thing I would also point out is that we have to learn and grow and develop as people. You know, I didn't come from the sector originally. I've had to learn, which has been a privilege and a great opportunity. And what's helped support me in that has been the industry. So many of you are happy to share information with us, invite us to come and see your businesses and understand how they work. And making sure our staff get an opportunity to do that as much as possible is really important to me. And we've been able to do that. So I think there's that, and then there's working differently as well. You know, part of the way we're trying to work differently is to, you know, this kind of thing, engage with people differently. There's a whole load of things we're doing to try and operate differently. You will have seen the code review program omnibus process kicking back into gear again. I could probably talk for ages about all the things that we're trying to do differently, but most importantly, you'll see it when you see it, right? You'll know that it's happening when you see those proof points, and that's what's important to me. I don't know if I answered that very well. There's a lot to say.
All right, cool. I think we're out of questions for now, but keep the feedback coming throughout the day. Use the online chat to send us through any questions.
Yeah, please do. And I just reiterate that we want to hear from you how we can improve this. What things you want answered. Yeah, awesome.
Right, thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, everyone.
Just as Sarah leaves the room, she talked about MDAG recommendations. And next up, we've got Kirsty and Seb, who are going to be talking about the MDAG report and its recommendations. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Nice to be here. Good afternoon, everybody.
So, Kirsty, what is the Market Development Advisory Group and what is its purpose?
Well, the Market Development Advisory Group was formed by the authority in 2017, and its purpose is to provide independent advice to the authority on issues that relate to pricing and cost allocation, risk management and operational efficiencies. There are currently 8 members on the Market Development Advisory Group, and they bring wide-ranging expertise and experience from across the electricity industry.
So, Seb, why did the authority commission MDAG to do this particular project?
Well, New Zealand's electricity system is on the brink of transformation, and we need to ensure that our regulatory system remains fit for purpose to facilitate competition and innovation. So as audience members will be aware, the drivers of change include the electrification of the economy, the expansion of renewable generation, particularly wind and solar, and new participants entering the market. So they include those who offer generation as well as storage and demand side response. So these changes will result in a more complex electricity system. So in July 2021, the authority commissioned MDAG to carry out a project to consider how the wholesale market should be strengthened for a high renewable electricity system. Throughout this project, MDAG produced 2 consultation papers where they sought feedback from the sector. And in December last year, MDAG provided a final recommendations paper to the authority. So this paper is it's titled Price Discovery in a Renewables-Based Electricity System, and it can be found on our website.
Oh, thanks, Seb. So what do the MDAG's recommendations seek to address?
Well, MDAG has developed a package of 31 recommendations that work together to strengthen what they refer to as the 4 pillars of a well-functioning wholesale electricity market. Now, these pillars are accurate and clear price signals, tools to manage risk, competition, and public confidence. Around 15 of the recommendations contribute particularly to accurate pricing, and this really underscores the importance of clear price signals as we move into a system that has many more participants and more resources to coordinate. 2 of these measures are improvements to short-term forecasts of wind, solar and demand. And another one is improvements to the disclosure of hedge market information, especially non-base load for offers, bids and agreed prices. So spot prices are expected to be more volatile as the amount of weather-dependent generation increases, and this means participants will need better access to risk management tools. MDAG have several recommendations to improve risk management, including strengthening the contract market. MDAG note that the contract market will have to do much more of the heavy lifting. So, for example, they recommend that the authority facilitate the development of standardised flexible supply contracts. They also have put forward measures to support demand-side flexibility services and to strengthen the stress testing regime, so participants are better placed to manage their exposure to price volatility. Competition is obviously also essential to improving outcomes for consumers. And MDAG's approach is that competition needs to be built into market arrangements from the outset. A number of MDAG's recommendations under the accurate pricing and risk management pillars also support competition. Examples such as hedge market disclosure, but also disclosure of non-price information, such as the process steps of parties negotiating over-the-counter contracts. better access to risk management tools such as shaped products and also support for demand-side flexibility are also critical to enabling competition. And MDAG also have a big focus on making more data and information publicly available. Some of the recommendations to strengthen competition are contingent measures, so they depend on the outcome of prior actions. So for example, recommendation 24 requires market making for flexibility products. Now that's a backstop measure dependent on the outcome of recommendation 8, which is to develop new flexibility products. And last but not least, MDAG consider that public understanding and confidence in the market is foundational. Many of the recommendations under the earlier pillars support market confidence, but they recommend these are augmented with additional measures to improve public information and understanding of the electricity system.
Okay, Seb, over to you now. A lot of recommendations in there. How has the MDAG prioritised those recommendations?
Yeah, so as Kirsty mentioned before, MDAG provided 31 recommendations to the authority. MDAG has grouped its recommendations into 3 tranches that reflect its view of priority and order of implementation, and around half of these are in tranche 1. MDAG has prioritised these recommendations because it thinks they will result in the greatest benefit to consumers, and these recommendations also reflect feedback MDAG received through the consultation process.
So out of all those recommendations, how many will the authority actually progress?
Well, I'm pleased to say the authority is already progressing many of the many projects that address MDAG's priority recommendations. So some of these are things that I've already mentioned, like improving hedge disclosure obligations, and you'll be aware that consultation on a preferred options paper is closing tomorrow. We have work underway to review the forecasting provisions for intermittent generators. And we're also exploring potential solutions to peak electricity capacity issues. And Chris Otten will discuss this project in more detail in the next session. We expect to be able to provide an update in the next few weeks on how we are incorporating MDAG's recommendations into the authority's work programme.
Just for some concluding remarks, I'd like to finish by thanking MDAG for undertaking the project and for providing the authority with this report. It's a fantastic piece of work and it will form a hugely important part of the authority's forward work programme.
Thanks, Seb. We'll open now to the audience for any questions, but maybe as a bit of a primer. What has been the industry response to the MDAG report so far?
Well, so far there's been a really positive response, and MDAG's report has been very well received by the sector. And I think this reflects the really careful approach that MDAG took to identifying the issues that need to be addressed, and the extensive consultation as well that they undertook both on those issues and on potential solutions. And we are very much looking forward to further engagement with the industry and participants as we take that work forward.
And do we have any questions coming in from the audience?
Yeah, I've got a question for you. So now MDAG's made its recommendations, what topics are MDAG likely to look at in future?
That is an excellent question, and I do not have the answer for that immediately, but happy to come back and provide more clarity on that.
Great. Yeah, so we have another question about what's next for MDAG, which we can get back to you on, and a question about whether it's being replaced by our new advisory group. Any new advisory groups here? Or?
So I think there was a discussion on advisory groups, and I think there are to be further announcements on that shortly.
You guys, any further questions coming through? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. We'll let you go. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter.
Just as Seb and Kirsty leave the room, you heard Sarah talk about one of our high priorities being security of supply. Chris Otten is up next to talk about work underway in regards to peak capacity consultation.
G'day, Chris. Hey, Peter. How you doing? Hi, everybody.
So let's start. What are we doing in peak capacity?
That's a good question. If I can start with a bit of context around what we're looking at. So everybody online will know about the drive to meet our net zero obligation by 2050. And that's going to have a significant impact on the structure and the way our system behaves on our market. If we're to meet the kind of forecasted 50% increase in demand over the next few years, we're going to need significant investment in renewable generation. Much of this investment is likely to be in the form of variable renewables, such as wind and solar. And this kind of raises reliability questions. How do we meet demand when the wind isn't blowing, the sun isn't shining? Incentivizing flexible resources, such as battery energy storage systems and demand response, are key to kind of meeting this flexibility need. This challenge is kind of already presenting itself in the kind of recent winter peak challenge that we've been trying to manage.
So can you describe for us what you mean by a peak capacity issue?
Yes, sure. So the recent kind of drive for electrification has driven an increase in peak demand, I think, of the order of about 1.5 to 2% a year over the last 2 or 3 years. And this is there's also been the combination of thermal fuel issues, some new variable renewables displacing thermal generation from the baseload fleet. And this has led to kind of periods of coordination issues between the resources we have in meeting that increased peak demand. There's generally enough capacity to meet demand most of the time. It's just we need to make sure that there's enough available when we need it for those short demand peaks.
Does the authority believe that this will be a long-term issue for our system?
As we discuss in our paper, we think the next couple of winters will face similar challenges to winter 23. In the medium to long term, Julia's going to talk about the investment survey. We see a strong pipeline of committed generation coming online, which will help, and along with battery storage, that will help with manage those peak situations. Yep.
So what's happening at the authority to address these issues now?
So, as hopefully everybody will be aware, last year we put in place the Winter 23 initiative. So those, as Sarah mentioned, were around improving information to the market to be able to coordinate the resources we had. And despite some very high kind of demand peaks last winter, we managed to get through with no major loss of supply incidents due to a lack of generation. These additional incentives, improved coordination by the system operator and the industry participation in those initiatives combined to meet those challenges and ensure the lights stayed on.
Sounds great, but have participants been taking any further action to address these issues?
Oh, they absolutely have, and we've been really encouraged by the innovation that we're seeing in the industry. So things like our retailer tariffs that have demand shifting, so the free hour of power or 3 hours of power that we've been seeing coming through, really good about moving that demand away from the peak and managing to soften the peak and spread it out. We've seen some coordination of domestic battery storage systems into the ancillary services market and into the dispatch notification market over this winter, some good trials in there. And we're starting to see the investment in utility scale and grid scale batteries starting to come online as well.
So coming back to the consultation paper released in January, how is the authority approaching addressing the peak capacity issue?
So we've taken the peak capacity issue and we're looking at it over a number of time periods over horizons. So we're kind of looking at the short term, the near, and the kind of next 12 months or so as needing improved coordination between the existing kind of resources we have, the flexible generation, demand response, and so on, and making sure that that flexibility is visible to the market. We also want to look at the market settings for the medium term, which is the 3 to 4 year period, to make sure that the right incentives in place to encourage further investment in those resources. And as we move into that kind of medium term, the 2 to 4 year period, the kind of wider adoption of battery storage systems and distributed energy resources coordinated in the market will help manage those peak supplies periods. And then kind of in the long term, we expect the kind of generation pipeline to start catching up with the generation and managing it. And that's where programs such as the MDAG work that Kirsty mentioned come in, and looking at how we get the market settings right for that longer term view.
So in the short term, you talked about the coordination of existing resources. And why is that?
So while we're encouraged by the kind of innovation and the new products that are coming to market, in reality, it takes time to get new physical systems in place. By the time you've designed, consented, purchased, and then installed these resources, it's quite a long-term commitment. So trying to put in incentives now to bring those resources in quickly just isn't practical. So we see the need to coordinate what we have now and get better visibility in the midterm, as in the kind of short term, as those new resources that we know are coming online and are committed come in. Whilst we can make code amendments, changes to business practices can be a bit quicker, but then we also acknowledge behind that there's possibly then contractual issues or installation of equipment issues behind that, bringing that flexibility to market that will take time again.
So what does the authority think is needed to address the peak capacity issue in the medium term?
So as we kind of devote a bit of time to in the paper, the consultation paper, we believe that enhancing the participation of kind of demand response and flexible resources in the wholesale market will provide those added incentives to get those investment business cases across the line. We are actively seeking, we're part of the consultation, we want to hear participants' views on this, and this is around kind of enhancing participation of demand response and flexible resources in the market, reviewing the existing ancillary services with a view to broadening participation, so bringing batteries and demand response into the ancillary services markets. And there's also, as Kirsty mentioned, the MDAG work around flexible contracts on the ASX or wherever. We'd also, there are a number of other potential options that we discussed in the paper, things around bringing demand response into the frequency keeping market, much like they have in the Australian market, whether we can accelerate flexibility investment through improved market access, developing our thoughts on developing an integrated standby ancillary service, and the kind of opinions on what the positions we put forward on an out of market solution.
So what are the next steps for our peak capacity work?
So at the moment, the consultation runs until the 1st of March. And once we've reviewed submissions, we'll be aiming to get a decision paper out towards the middle of this year.
Right. That's excellent. Thank you, Chris.
No worries.
Just before we let you go, we'll throw over to the audience. Are there any questions coming through for Chris?
Yeah, we do have a question actually. So the free hour of power is having a herding effect on the distribution networks. Has the authority considered the unintended consequences of retail offerings like that?
Yep, so we have been in discussion with a number of distributors around coordination of not just the retailers, but any third-party aggregators as well, and how that could be managed under the contractual arrangements we have that are in place among things like the default distributors agreement. So yes, we are aware of those issues, and we are, particularly our retailer networks team, is discussing those issues with distributors.
Okay.
No further questions coming through? All right.
Okay.
We'll let you go.
Thank you very much.
For your
Cheers,
time.
everyone.
And just as Chris is leaving the room, Julie is going to be joining me from our market monitoring team, and she'll be providing us some insights into the Generation Investment Survey 2023. We published that in January this year. Kia ora. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, Peter. Hi, everyone.
So tell us a bit more about this survey and who did the survey?
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so Concept Consulting is who we commissioned to do the survey. It's an update of the 2022 survey, which was part of the wholesale market review. And so Concept was looking at both what the generation pipeline was and any hindrances, any hindrances to development. So overall, we along with Concept interviewed 42 parties. There were 22 developers, 8 industry experts, and 12 network distributors, about half of whom had their own development. And so along with the data that was gathered from the interview, Concept used some data from Transpower and from public sources to try and get the best picture possible of what the generation pipeline is looking like.
And so what was the most significant finding of this survey?
Yeah, so quite promising as we found that since 2022, the generation pipeline that of committed generations, that means that they have their consent, they've made their final investment decisions has almost doubled from 2,600 to 5,000 gigawatt hours per annum. And to put that into perspective, TY's annual consumption is about 5,000 gigawatt hours per annum. So that's quite a sizable pipeline of new generation that's coming along. Most of that is geothermal, but we've also got a lot of wind and a lot of solar.
And will that be enough new generation to meet our future demand?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And Concept estimated that there would be about 1,700 gigawatt hours of new demand by 2025. And in the next slide, I don't know who's, yeah, you can also see though that Concept estimates that there's about 5,000 gigawatt, well, no, not quite that. There is a sizable amount of thermal that will also be displaced. This is both from thermal retirement as well as the remaining thermal generators, maybe not generating as often and instead keeping that for peak times. So the amount of committed projects to 2025 is about equal to the amount of thermal we expect to be displaced. So that means that we still need additional investment for that demand growth. But we also had about 3,600 gigawatt hours of projects that could be completed by 2025 that had not yet, they were being actively pursued but not yet committed. So these are projects that maybe are still getting consents or just still waiting for their final investment decision. And then looking forward to 2027, we can see a lot more actively pursued projects, a lot more than the demand growth expected. Though of course, the further out we look, the more uncertainty about how many of those projects will actually go ahead.
And what did developers say in the survey that they thought were their biggest challenges?
Yeah, well, when we talked to developers, it really depended on what stage their developments were in and also the kind of developer they were as to what they said the biggest challenges were. But a consistent theme among all of them was around the consent process. For many of the ones that are committed right now, they or are close to their final investment decision, they have their consents. They were able to use the fast track process. But in terms of like looking forward, there's a lot of uncertainty. Our interviews were before the election, and for wind developers in particular, there can be a long time to get those consents, and also overseas, people were getting overseas investment were saying that there was time and money to get those consents for overseas investment.
And what about, were there any other challenges or obstacles that were identified?
Yeah, so another big challenge that we identified this time was around getting network connections, particularly for solar developers. So Transpower has reported that they've had a big increase in generation connection inquiries, and they have started publishing that their queue for these connections since 2022, which developers said was really good. It gave them more visibility of what else was being developed. But you know, if you were back in the queue or you weren't yet in the queue, there was a lot of concerns around the times for connection studies and then to actually get connected. We also noticed that there was a big increase in the number of developers interested in connecting at the network level, so not to the Transpower's grid. And so we also talked to more network developers to get their view on this. And both the developers and the distributors are finding this increase a challenge. Part 6, which covers this type of distributed generation, when it was written, they weren't anticipating these type of developers connecting to network distributors. So we are going to review Part 6 later in this year, and there's also key work underway to reform distribution network settings and distribution pricing to enable innovation and investment in this area.
Wow, thank you. So, Julia, what do you feel are the biggest challenges going forward?
Yeah, well, as we saw earlier, there's a lot of solar and wind generation coming along, especially when we look longer term. A lot of that potential new development is solar. And so as Chris talked about earlier, that does mean we're going to need more flexibility in the system, whether that's demand response, battery storage, or just how we use our flexible resources going forward might need a change.
So you mentioned battery storage. Were many developers considering battery storage?
Yes, there were. So there are a couple of battery projects already in development, but also when we talk to solar developers, the majority of them said that they were including the option to include a battery in their plans. Right now, the consensus was that the economics unfavoured to install them. Like if they were building them today, they would not install a battery. But as battery prices fall, or if other financial incentives come in, that could easily change and we could see a lot more batteries being installed.
So what's next in terms of this type of work?
Well, we think that this generation pipeline data is really valuable. Concept found that for these committed projects, a lot of them, it was not clear in the public domain if they were committed or not. And also MDAG recommended that we update and publish this data regularly. So right now we are looking into ways that we can collect and publish this data on a regular basis without having to do a full survey like we have done this last 2 times. We've already had a conversation with Transpower to get their view on how we could do this.
That sounds awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll throw over now, Julie, to the audience. They might have some questions for you.
Yep.
I've got one for you to kick off.
Okay.
Has uncertainty around Tiwai impacted any of the generation pipeline work you're thinking?
Yeah, well, I mean, every developer will be looking at what's happening in the market when they make the decisions, and we don't know how much there would be in the pipeline if there wasn't uncertainty. But what we did find is the developers we talked to either were not that concerned about Tiwai, or they were under the impression that Tiwai was most likely to remain. There were a lot of comments, though, that in general, uncertainty can make that decision-making more difficult for them.
That's interesting stuff, thank you. A question from the audience.
Yeah, Julia, will the Part 6 review include battery energy storage systems as part of the scope, and also pricing principles? Do you know?
I can't answer that directly. I do believe that pricing will be part of the work in terms of network settings in general, probably part of Part 6 as well, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we have another question here. So it's great to see how the gap is closing between estimated LRMC and wholesale contract prices. This is any thoughts about how further NI battery and DR might help further close the gap?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, definitely, you know, with the volatility, one of the issues is that we could have like higher peak prices, and I think the batteries and the demand response can help with those very high prices. So in that way, it could reduce risk, and that could help bring the price up in. But I don't think I can comment much more than that. Yeah.
All right. No more questions? That's really interesting stuff, Julie. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yep.
Is there another question coming through?
Yep, just another question here. Is the authority across all of the industry association work underway for renewable generation?
I don't know if I can answer that myself.
We can.
Yeah, we can get back to you. Yeah.
That might need a wider authority response.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Right, we're good to go. All right, thanks, Julia. Thanks very much. Next up, we're going to hear about Grant, who's going to be talking to us about keeping the code up to date as the system evolves. G'day, Grant. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Peter.
So, Grant, what's happening with this code review program?
Right, code review program number 5. So mid last year, we released a consultation paper on a collection of small code amendments. We proposed 23 small code amendments and 89 technical and non-controversial changes, mainly editorial and typo fixes. As a result of consultation, we had 11 submitters and they gave us 45 individual submissions. These resulted in quite a bit of change to the original proposals. I just want to thank all submitters for taking the time to send us your thoughts. Last week, on the 30th of January, we released our decision on all of those code changes. The actual code changes will come into force on the 1st of March. If you've got any questions about those changes or how you implement them, please contact me by email at reg.ops@ea.govt.nz. That email address will be published on the slide pack. I'd just like to highlight a couple of the changes. For participants who aren't based in Wellington, we have changed the definition of business day to include Wellington anniversary. For distributors and retailers, we're changing the way ICPs are added to or removed from shared unmetered load. This is to ensure that the beneficiaries of that load pay their fair share of the cost. Good news for some generators, we're formalising the process to rebate interest from the clearing manager's accounts, and you guys will be getting that interest back. For MEPs and ATHs, one change we're making is extending the maximum validity period for ICPs that are certified using stat sampling. Last word on code review program, CRP number 6 work starts very soon, and we hope to be releasing a consultation paper sometime later this year, probably August or September.
I just want to clarify something you said. You mentioned Wellington Anniversary Day as a business day. I just want to say, did you mean that to be a non-business day? And why Wellington? Why not other regions?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Peter. I didn't realise I made an error. Definitely it's a non-business day, because I'll be on holiday. The reason for including it is in all previous years we've manually declared a non-business day. The reason for that is that the authority staff and several of our service providers, the clearing manager and the reconciliation manager, and the banks they use are all based in Wellington. So all the people that will have code obligations will be on holiday.
So can you give us an update on the Code Amendment Omnibus?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. The Code Amendment Omnibus is currently out for consultation. In fact, consultation closes tomorrow, 5 p.m, 9th of Feb. So if you haven't put your submission in, you've only got a day or so to do that. The Omnibus itself covers 3 separate and discrete code amendments. The first is a change to Part 6A to include all generation technologies in that regime. The second is making permanent an urgent code amendment that is now expired that regards the discretionary demand process when grid emergency notices are released by the system operator. And the last change is more an editorial change on Part 6A, aligning the language for the code drafting, for our code drafting standards after the provisions were moved from the Act last year. So once submissions are closed, each of the project teams will look at those submissions and will put together their decision paper, which will go to our board later in March. We hope to release all 3 decision papers early in April. So going forward, we expect to release regular omnibuses throughout each year. The next one scheduled to be released in early May and already has 2 candidates for it. The next 2 for this year will be August and December. If we don't have any candidates for those, we'll cancel those and we'll let you all know in our market brief closer to the time. Just one last thing I'd like to cover before we move on. Electricity information exchange protocols, those wonderful devices for transferring information between participants. 5A is for distributors to notify retailers of planned outages. There were some changes to 5A, mainly to the delivery mechanism, and those changes become mandatory on the 1st of April. We're planning a separate webinar. You would have seen it in Market Brief a couple of days ago. We're planning a separate webinar later this month to discuss any implementation issues you have around going live on the 1st of April. Ginny, who's up later in this session, will have a little bit more to say on that. Thanks. Back to you, Peter.
That's right. So can you tell us what is the difference between a code review program and an omnibus?
That's a great question, Peter. So the code review program is a collection of very small changes, mainly the sort of stuff that aids clarity, removes ambiguity, or editorial changes to the code. We've been doing those for quite a few years now. The omnibus is something a bit newer, and the omnibus is a way to package together a number of medium-sized changes to the code. So they're all just, each of those are discrete. They're too big to include in the code review program. And the idea of packaging them together is to make it easier for participants and for us to respond to those, so they come together as a single paper rather than as a stream of small consultations that need to be responded to.
Right. Thanks, Grant. Look, we'll throw to the audience now. I think we might have a question come through.
Yeah, that's right. Grant, we just got a question about Code Review Programme 6. Just a question about whether the authority will be consulting on the minimum requirements for cybersecurity.
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question, and the short answer is no. There's no proposal on minimum requirements for cybersecurity. So if a participant has an idea for that, cybersecurity is such a big topic. So if you've got something specific in mind, whoever asked that question, if they've got something specific in mind, please go to our website, to the code and app page, I think it's called. There's a selection down there about making code amendment requests, and submit one of those, and we'll assess that and add it to the list. Might not get into number 6, but if it's something that we think we should consult on, it'll be on that list.
Any further questions come through? All right, Grant, thanks for that update. And if anyone has any further questions for Grant and his team, contact us at reg.ops@ea.govt.nz.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. All right, next up, we're going to hear from Dan Griffiths, Policy Manager for Retail and Networks. Kia ora, Dan.
Hey. Kia ora, Peter, and kia ora tātou, ko Daniel Griffiths hau.
So, Dan, well, recently the authority made a big announcement on its consumer work. What did that announcement cover?
Cool, 2 things. I should say that the authority is progressing a number of initiatives to help support consumer outcomes in the electricity industry. Consumers are at the heart of what we do here at the authority. Electricity is a crucial service that supports us in our everyday lives and also helps us to innovate for future generations. We recognise that consumers can and should have more control over their energy use, receive a standard and consistent level of care from their electricity provider, and have confidence that the regulatory and policy decisions are informed by accurate and up-to-date data. So quite recently, last week on Thursday, we announced that we're going to mandate the consumer care guidelines. And we're also looking more broadly at options that we can put in place to support consumers to compare and switch electricity plans.
And so tell us more about how this work supports our additional objective.
So just over a year ago, amendments were made to the Electricity Industry Act to introduce an additional objective as well as associated functions to protect the interests of domestic consumers and small business in relation to, I'm going to read this out because it does get it wordy, in relation to the supply of electricity use to those consumers, specifically in their dealings with industry participants with these consumers. So this additional objective complements the authority's main objective of promoting competition, reliable supply and efficient operation for the long-term benefits of consumers. So it's safe to say that consumer protection is a core focus for us. And as New Zealand's electricity regulator, we focus on consumers' confidence and best interests, supporting industry participants to enable a reliable power supply, product choice and innovative services for consumers. So our vision is that all consumers have choices in accessing the energy they need now and into the future so that they in New Zealand prosper. This requires a sustainable, affordable and secure and resilient electricity system that supports the empowered consumer of the future.
So Dan, you dropped earlier in your talk there that there's been a decision on the consumer care guidelines. What are the next steps?
Cool. I might just unpack a bit of the recent history with the guidelines. It's quite relevant. The guidelines were introduced in 2021 through close engagement with the industry, with government, NGOs and stakeholders. So these voluntary guidelines were to support electricity retailers to deliver a consistent and supportive minimum standard of care for New Zealand domestic consumers. These cover things like sign-up processes, outline appropriate actions when consumers face challenges or difficulties in bill payments. They crucially cover the situations around safeguarding medically dependent consumers and other important consumer protections. So at the time that we introduced the guidelines, we said that we would mandate these if we didn't see them delivering on their intended outcomes. So work we did last year suggested that there was an inconsistent outworking of the guidelines, and we consulted in September on options to update and to strengthen these consumer protections. And we received some wide feedback. So again, echo previous presenters, and thank you very much for the engagement that we received on this. We had 128 written submissions, including a couple from some children, which was just fantastic to see the level of engagement, and over 1,000 substantive submissions to an online questionnaire to the consultation paper. Now, the key feedback that we received from that was support from various groups of submitters to strengthen consumer protections, and agreement that the voluntary nature of the guidelines wasn't providing effective protection. Now, groups of submitters includes consumers, consumer advocacy groups, retailers and other key stakeholders. So really good feedback. We had proposed 4 different options in terms of mandating some of the guidelines, all of them doing nothing and just touching up the words, and there was overwhelming support for us mandating the guidelines, so we made the decision to strengthen our option and to mandate the guidelines to improve consumer protections. Now, there's a few things I think I just want to unpack on the back of that decision. That as part of making the guidelines mandatory, respondents to a consultation also urged us to resolve the workability issues, to resolve some of the challenges that we saw that retailers were experiencing in their initial implementation of these. We also need to do some work to address the enforceability issues with current guidelines, because these were drafted to be voluntary. So I see this as a critical step to ensure that the mandated guidelines enhance consumer protections, improve clarity, workability and enforceability, and resolve other issues so that we avoid imposing undue costs on the electricity market. Now, the degree that we can resolve these issues raised by industry participants will depend on the level of engagement we get through the process that we'll be running very shortly. And we're looking at coming out with a proposed code amendment in the second half of this year. And we're strongly committed to full implementation by 1 January. And then the last thing I'll say is that as we work through and mandate the guidelines, we fully expect retailers to maintain or improve their alignment with the current guidelines, and we'll continue to monitor and report on alignment procedures to ensure protections for consumers are being upheld.
So just on alignment, you released the 2023 alignment report, which is a key monitoring tool for the authority. What did that most recent report tell you?
So we released the second alignment report, so this is the 22-23 Consumer Care Guidelines Annual Alignment Statement, and we released this alongside the decision on mandating guidelines. This showed much greater reported alignment with the guidelines compared to the one that we did for the 21-22 alignment report, particularly among large and medium retailers. So of the 14 large and medium retailers who provided self-assessments, 12 stated that they were fully aligned. Of these 6 large retailers and 6 out of the 8 medium retailers reported full alignment, and 2 outstanding medium retailers said they were partially aligned with guidelines. Now, as large and medium retailers represent about 98% of ICPs, or installation collection points, or a customer is an easy way of thinking about it, that indicates that a majority of domestic consumers are covered by retailers who consider themselves aligned with the guidelines. And if we unpack that a little bit further and look at all retailers, so large, medium and small, who are fully aligned with the guidelines, 95% of all ICPs are covered with the guidelines. And as part of the report, we also unpacked some changes. So with this alignment report, we contacted more retailers and made significant improvements to the data collection and reporting processes responding to what we learned out of our review of the first alignment report. Some of these were that we expanded the retailer eligibility criteria, and we've contacted nearly 60 retailers this time around, and we've also redesigned the alignment statement form to improve reporting. And just lastly, a word on the smaller retailers. As we've gone out to more smaller retailers, we have seen more retailers, and especially those small ones, engaging with the guidelines, which is good to see. And while they are the group that is least aligned with the guidelines, this alignment is improving.
That's good. So Dan, earlier you mentioned an options paper to support consumers, compare plans and switch. What is important about consumer switching, and what did you have in mind?
Cool. So encouraging consumers to compare and switch electricity retailers provides consumers with greater agency over how they use their power and what it costs them. It also has wider benefits, such as strengthening retail competition, which ideally can reduce electricity prices and help lower the cost of living, and also encourages retailers to develop innovative products to meet consumers' needs as they look to gain market share on more consumers. One of the authority's functions is to promote the benefits of comparing and switching retailers to consumers, and to this end we've funded the consumer-run Power Switch website to date. So Power Switch allows consumers to compare electricity retailers and their plans, and switch to those that are most cost effective to meet their needs. However, we do know that consumer switching rates are relatively low. Only about 6% of households switch retailers every year once you take out those who are switching when they move houses. So to improve outcomes for consumers, we've developed a range of options to support consumers. These start with continuing with looking at a website or a technology-based platform, if you will, akin to the Power Switch type approach, and there's a range of options about how that might be facilitated in terms of industry-led through to facilitated by the authority through to an authority-run website. And there's a range of other options to support, including the providing a best requiring retailers to provide a best plan assessment to their customers, community advisor support and promotional activities. So it's our current preference that we have a suite of measures that support consumers with the authority supported website or technology as a cornerstone, while also mandating the retailers to provide a best plan information and looking at how we can facilitate community advisors and promotional activities. So this consultation is open to the 8th of March, and we're keen on feedback about the ways that we can support our preferred options. It's there's been a lot of changes over the last couple of years, so we're expecting some really good feedback on innovative ways that we can support consumers.
Dan, there's some wider work that you've got underway as well. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
So we've been consulting on our proposal to improve monitoring in the retail market. There's a webinar that's now live that I gave in the middle of January. The retail monitoring project is a significant proposal for the authority as we look to strengthen our retail market monitoring. It's safe to say that the role that data plays in both business and society continues to grow, and the step up that the authority proposes mirrors this increased significance of data. So as a modern regulator, we develop insights based on accurate data, and these contribute to timely, effective and evidence-based policy, and this ultimately benefits consumers if these are well made. So in terms of how we do that at the moment, it's probably best to unpack a little bit of that and talk about the proposal. So currently the authority monitors the retail market to achieve our statutory aim to promote competition, reliability and efficiency, as well as also monitoring for our additional objective to protect the interests of domestic and small business consumers. So this monitoring at the moment, we receive relevant information across multiple collection mechanisms, including some that are voluntary. So we've come to the point that we believe that the current collection mechanisms, they overlap in their collection of the retail information, and they don't provide us sort of the full suite of sufficient information to monitor the retail market, notably around retail pricing and outcomes for domestic and small business consumers. So things like arrears levels, disconnections and fees are somewhere we're really looking to up our level of collection and also our monitoring effort as well. So to do that, we're proposing a streamlined collection of retail data and this will remove those overlapping requests, which we've heard from retailers, and those providing data is a bit of a pain point. And we'll replace this with a new single requirement under the powers, using our powers under clause 2.16 of the code. And this is really aiming to achieve 4 key things. We've got information gaps that we need to fill. We want to consolidate and streamline our data requests. We also want to make more information available and to do so at a reasonable cost to those providing the data. So we're aware as we get into a more information-rich environment that we are looking to step up our monitoring and our publication of the data we collect alongside this consultation. And I know just a small aside that for a step that we've made recently is that we've recently begun to publish information that we receive under the retailer financial stress notice that's currently in place. So this information is available on our electricity market information website or EMI. And this data, notwithstanding the limitations, which we do unpack under the Retail Data Monitoring Project, inform on debt disconnections and vulnerable consumers. So I hope people can check that information out and to be more informed about what we're seeing.
Great stuff. All right, thanks, Dan. We'll throw over to the audience. Are there any questions coming through?
Yeah, we've just got one question down about the clarity of the consumer care guidelines. Some feedback that some of the requirements could be seen as a bit vague and open to interpretation. So just wondered what the authorities' plans are in terms of improving the clarity, maybe rewording the guidelines.
Certainly. So a great question. It's certainly one thing that we're looking to do and do at pace as well. We want to have these new guidelines put in place and effective from the 1st of January 2025, and we're committed to that. We're going to be engaging with key stakeholders over coming months to improve the workability, clarity and enforceability of the guidelines. There are some places that we've had some good feedback through the options paper that we published in September last year. So to our, as Appendix B to our decision paper, we've outlined some of those key workability issues that were raised during the consultation. And there's also evidence that we're seeing coming through the alignment report where we note that while achieving the principle of the guidelines, some retailers have used alternative methods. And so we're using that as the evidence to do our own review of going clause by clause through the guidelines to identify issues where we need to improve the workability, clarity. And certainly as they were written initially as voluntary, Peter's going to be on my case to make sure that these are enforceable too. And I think that benefits everyone that we're really clear about what we're seeking with those.
Okay, and another question's just come through. So given the legislative change to strengthen consumer protection, is there a review of the authorities' interpretation of statutory objective in the works?
We're certainly looking very closely at how we give function to the additional objective. I'm aware there is a document on the website that was published in 2010, or also as part of our formation. I'm not close enough to know whether that is going to be revisited, but we're certainly doing a lot of work to understand the as part of our function, the new obligations and role that we need to play with our objective. We certainly believe that this sort of sits right alongside our primary objective of competition, reliability and efficiency. So definitely safe to say that there's work underway to ensure that we're outworking that function to protect the interests of domestic consumers and small businesses.
No more coming through? All right, thanks, Dan. Just before you head off, Dan, just reminding our audience, what's the best avenue for anyone to be in touch with you or your team?
Excellent. So we have certainly under the switching paper, there's email addresses that you can use. Otherwise, so for the consultation on retail data, it's retaildata@ea.gov.nz and consumer switching at ea.gov.nz for the switching. Awesome.
Right, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Now, with any new piece of legislation or code, there comes education to inform the regulated community about what compliance looks like. And to talk about compliance education is Ginny. Hi, Ginny.
Hi, Peter.
So, compliance education. What's happening in in that space for you and the authority?
Yeah, so attendees might remember me from the previous stakeholder meeting that we had where I introduced myself. I was new to the authority. And so since then, what we've been doing is creating a education program for the industry. That what we're wanting is for participants to understand the Electricity Industry Participation Code and their compliance obligations. We're looking at delivering the training in 2024 and 2025 through forums, workshops, webinars, publications, and also guidance on our website.
Cool. So can you just go through again what's planned and how you'll deliver that?
Yep, so what it is we recognise that we needed to provide education as part of our compliance function and policy development, and that's helped shape the compliance education program. Our aim is to develop and coordinate educational activities delivered by the Electricity Authority and other stakeholders. Our primary focus is to increase the compliance of participants through the code through raising understanding and competency.
Now, I've heard through the grapevine that you had a survey that has been posted. Can you tell us about what that survey is asking and who can complete it?
Yep, sure. I'll touch on the survey just in a moment. I'll just mention a few other things that we've got on. So what we're doing is we're creating educational activities to do with different sectors of the industry, such as auditors, distributors, register users, and new entrants. At the moment, what we're doing is we are looking at topics in relation to for the consumer care guidelines. We're also creating guidance for the industry and the public. So back to your question about the survey, we've also created a survey that was sent out yesterday to the industry. We're asking to hear about what people would like to hear from us in terms of like what would you want us to deliver for you for the industry. So a survey was sent out yesterday. We sent that through the information provision portal. We've also highlighted that through the news on our website and also through the market brief. We're running the survey to essentially ask the industry what you would like us to provide to you. The results will help us just shape that compliance education program. We have ideas about what we want to do, but we're wanting to hear back from the industry just to make sure that we are delivering what people actually want from us. We're looking for as many responses as possible from organisations, so we don't actually just want to rely on just one response from each organisation. If you've got an opinion about what kind of training you would like, then we're keen to hear from you. The survey is really quick and only should take about 3 minutes to answer. There's 3 essential questions to it. First one is essentially just asking what you would obviously, again, like us to provide training on. We have provided a list of ideas for people that do respond to the survey, and they just need to list their top 5. We'd then also like to know if there's any other training topics that they would like the organisation to provide training on. And then lastly, we're just looking for any other responses or suggestions on how we can best support the organisation.
So you've got the survey out at the moment. What other activities have you got coming up?
Yep, so obviously Grant spoke a little bit earlier on in this webinar. So we do have a webinar coming up in a couple of weeks that Grant is running, and that's on the EIEP 5A protocols. So lunchtime webinar on Wednesday, the 21st of February. It'll go just for an hour or so. So if people are interested in attending that webinar, when they go to the registry page, there is actually an email that we have provided. So if people do have questions that they want Grant to cover off in that lunchtime webinar, we're really keen to hear from people beforehand. I had a quick check today and we already have quite a few people registered for that lunchtime webinar, which is great. But again, if people do have questions that they would like Grant to have a look at beforehand so he can answer in the webinar, that would be awesome. We've also got an auditor forum coming up that's in May, so we're really excited about getting back into this again. The authority used to run auditor forums, which obviously stopped a couple of years ago or so. So we are getting back into that. The auditors will come here to Wellington for the day, and we'll have a bunch of people obviously from the authority presenting at that. And then just lastly, we're also compiling case studies and case decisions that we'll start publishing on our website. We're looking at creating a learning centre or knowledge base on our website as well. And we're also looking at creating guidelines in relation to compliance in regards to the consumer care guidelines. And then lastly, we're also looking at a roadshow that would go to the main centres. And if not a roadshow, then we're looking at a conference in Wellington for the industry. So as you can see, there's a whole lot of ideas that we've got. There's obviously a whole lot more, but in essence, we really just want to hear that from the industry, just to hear their ideas and get a flavour of what they're really wanting from us.
And for those who might have missed the survey, what's the best way to get a hold of that survey and to fill it in?
Yeah, just head to our website and you will find that there's an article about it. Just click on that and then that will take you through to a page where you can just obviously answer those questions.
Awesome, thank you. We'll just throw over to the audience. Any questions to Ginny about compliance education out there? Nothing heard. All right, thanks, Jenny.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Peter.
Okay, next up, we're joined by Michael up in Auckland. He's going to give us an update on the upcoming consultation and decisions.
Kia ora, Peter, and kia ora, everyone. I'm just going to take a minute or two at the end here to talk about how the authority will be seeking to engage with the industry and other stakeholders over the next couple of months. We should have a slide here, but what should hopefully be familiar to everyone is the authority's consultation calendar, which is available on our website. There she is. It details all of the consultations in the green and the decisions in the blue that the authority intends to go public with in the next 6 months, in this case up until June 2024. We've already heard this afternoon about some of the important consultations coming up, so I won't rehash those here. But what I do want to highlight is that we have a few particularly busy periods in the first part of this year. The first of these is in April, where we are looking to have 5 consultations live throughout that month. The second is in late May to June, where we will have 4 to 5 overlapping consultations. I'd also like to highlight that in June, we are aiming to begin consultation on our review of Part 8 of the Code. This will be a huge piece of work and one that we are really keen for the industry to actively participate in. The reason I'm highlighting these now is to give everyone an early heads up. If you are interested in these areas and want to respond or otherwise engage with the authority, please take this opportunity to think how you can best be prepared ahead of time. But we also want to emphasize that if anyone is facing difficulties or challenges with engaging in our consultations, please do get in touch with us early. We want to hear the views of all of our stakeholders, so we will do what we can to make space or time for respondents to have the opportunity to have their say. Now, this doesn't mean that we're going to grant blanket extensions across the board, but it does mean that we are open to working with stakeholders to help them navigate all of these consultations. I just want to finish off here by, on behalf of all of the authority and its staff, thank you to all of our stakeholders who have engaged with us on our various pieces of work recently. We do know that it's a huge effort, and we really do appreciate hearing all of the considered feedback that we receive. It really helps us make sure that we're making the right decisions for the benefit of New Zealand's electricity system and its consumers.
Awesome, thanks, Michael. Anyone from the audience have a question to Michael about our consultation and decision calendar? No? Oh.
Easy.
Yep, we have a question here. When can the industry expect a decision on the DDA?
I do not have that information available, but that is something that we can definitely come back to you on.
Thank you. No.
All right, well, that's it, folks. Thank you all again for joining us today. Wait, there's a question come through.
Yeah. Yep, so we just got a question about if the calendar could be updated 2 monthly or similarly rather than every 6 months. Yeah, we are looking to update the calendar more regularly. So just have a look at on our website. It's on the consultations page. Yeah, and also do get in touch with us if you would like any specific updates.
Excellent. All right, once again, thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you're all very busy, so taking this time out to hear from the authority means a lot to us, and we've enjoyed sharing our kōrero with you. Let's keep the conversations going throughout the slide pack, and throughout today you would have seen and heard email addresses. Feel free to use those or pick up the telephone and have a conversation with us here at the authority if you have any questions or anything you'd like to submit to us. We'll now close with the karakia. Will.
Tēnā koe pizza, kanutimi anō hoki ki o koutou, me ino e whakamutunga ai tātou. Kia whakiria te tapu, kia wāti ai tāra, kia tūruku whakatā ai, kia turuki whakatā ai, haumi e, hui e, tā ki e. Mā te wai ho, mā.